What's going on YouTube? Today I bring you my 2012 NFL redraft. I think I actually really like doing these, so I'm probably going to do one from 10 years ago, one from 20 years ago every year. And since we already did a 2002 redraft, which is up on the channel if you want to go watch that, and don't forget to subscribe when you do that, we are now going to have our 2012 redraft. And this was a pretty stacked class. You had some really good game-changing guys that, went around. And of course, there were some busts, but for the most part, this was a very talented draft class that a lot of teams did get good picks on. But looking back 10 years now, how did those picks turn out? Who made the right choices, who made the wrong choices? And we can take a look at, who went where and who they should retake in a redraft. So starting off, number one with the Colts, Andrew Luck was great. But I don't think there's a huge debate over this point that Russell Wilson has been a more successful quarterback. Now, what happened to Andrew Luck is unfortunate, and who knows, maybe in a redraft where he goes to the Colts again, maybe they, because the kind of assumption I go off with these is just we don't know what would happen from this point. Maybe the Colts decide to get protection for Luck sooner than they did, and by the time they built up a really good offensive line, it was already a little too late for Luck. So while he was a fantastic quarterback, Andrew Luck truly could have gone down as one of the greatest to ever do it. Unfortunately, he just didn't. He got too hurt. And so you're gonna then shift your focus to Russell Wilson, who in my mind is the best player to come out of this class. 10 years later, he's been to a couple Super Bowls. Obviously won one of them. He's never been an MVP. In fact, fun fact, Russell Wilson has never received a career MVP vote. And that's quite insane when you consider the fact that, honestly, if you took one player in the entire league and took them off of a team and see how much worse they would be, I think Russell Wilson just made the obvious case that it's him. Because, yeah, while he hasn't played fantastic recently, he played amazing at the beginning of the year before he got hurt, and the Seahawks suffered without him bad. Their offense could not do anything, and you pair that with their defense, Russell Wilson really just showed how valuable he's been. In real life, taken third round by the Seahawks, who you'll see later did go on to have a fantastic draft. But, what was just a grand slam of a pick for the Seahawks. And in this redraft, I think that the Colts take him because, Russell Wilson, he's done a lot of great things, even with a lot of makeshift offensive lines in Seattle. And so if you could have yourself a quarterback similar to Andrew Luck's, talent level, but also not deal with him getting hurt, I think Russell Wilson's your guy and would have been a fantastic pick for the Colts at number one overall. Then at number two, the then Washington Redskins would in real life take Robert Griffin III, who is also quite the unfortunate story because he was similar to Andrew Luck in a lot of ways. Not play style necessarily, but definitely in the form of he was obviously a very talented quarterback. He was the rookie of the year and he played great. He was basically Lamar Jackson before Lamar Jackson, and injuries just similar to Andrew Luck just ended his career. And he's still kind of drifting around the league, but he's definitely not the same player because of those injuries. And with the Redskins here, you're going to go with a guy who, hopefully it's not the same case where he doesn't deal with those injuries. But I think when you look at the two players, there's a clear divide of talent between Robert Griffin III and Andrew Luck. Even though RG3 could have been great, Andrew Luck was just on another level. And for a team like the Redskins that, sure, they still probably weren't ever going to get to like a Super Bowl with Andrew Luck, it still would have been a better pick. And who knows? Like I said, maybe they take Andrew Luck and it's the start of something new for at the time the Redskins. But in this redraft, that's who they would take. RG3, unfortunate just with injuries, both these players, but I think Andrew Luck is the better choice here in this redraft. Then number three overall, I know a very popular pick here is going to be probably like Luke Kuechly. I'd imagine either Luke Kuechly or Stephon Gilmore. I'm going a different option. And by the way, I know a lot of people might say like, oh, well, what about the Browns? Maybe, shouldn't the Browns be picking here? No, I'm going with the pre-draft order, so before draft day trades. So Vikings picking third overall here, and I have them taking Mitchell Schwartz. And yeah, sure, they would love a guy maybe like Luke Kuechly, right, or a Stephon Gilmore, but at the time, with a younger quarterback with Christian Ponder, they were still trying to build a team around. They took Matt Kalil for a reason, who he started out solid. I mean, I think he made the Pro Bowl as a rookie, but he just never really did anything much after that. Mitchell Schwartz, a bit of the opposite story because he actually started out a little slow for the Browns, went to the Chiefs, and from like 2014 to 2020, the dude was really a top tier tackle and probably in that time span the best right tackle in football. Especially during those latter years before he had a really bad back injury just a couple years ago, or even just a year ago, actually, with the Chiefs. At one point, was arguably the greatest lineman in the NFL. I wouldn't say he was the greatest, but he was arguably number one. At the very least, probably top five. So Mitchell Schwartz, may have had a slow start to his career, but who knows? Like I said, maybe he doesn't have a back injury and he might still be with the Vikings to this day, and be one of the best tackles in football, which would obviously be great for a team that is currently, kind of hurting at the offensive line. So yeah, Luke Kuechly would have been a great pick, right? Stephon Gilmore would have been awesome. There's a lot of other great players here. I think Mitchell Schwartz would have made the most sense for the Vikings at the time. So with the Browns at pick number 4, instead of trading up one pick to take Trent Richardson, I have them staying put here at the 4th pick overall and taking Luke Kuechly, who obviously would go on to have quite the phenomenal career with the Panthers. I couldn't tell you the exact. I mean, I can look it up, but went on to go have multiple Pro Bowl years, multiple All Pro years, and really, I mean, almost unarguably was the best linebacker of the 2010s. He really did have quite the great career. Went to a Super Bowl. I'm pretty sure won Defensive Player of the Year in 2013 or 2014. Might have been 2015, but somewhere in there, won Defensive Player of the Year. Was the Defensive Rookie of the Year. Luke Kuechly, truly one of the greatest to ever do it. And for a team like the Browns, which just had pretty much nothing going for them at the time, you might as well just take the best player available, and that's pretty far and above Luke Kuechly, who would have a Hall of Fame career in just about 7-8 years. So Luke Kuechly would have been an awesome pick for the Browns compared to Trent Richardson, which was just such a massive bust. He was great at Alabama, but just never got close to even reproducing that in the NFL. So I think Luke Kuechly would have been a great pick for the Browns. Number 5 overall, the Buccaneers are going to take Stephon Gilmore instead of trading down and taking Marcus Barron. Marcus Barron just, again, never really ended up being much. Sure, he's still certainly a draftable player. He did float around for a little bit, but just not worth the 7th or 5th pick overall, for that matter. Someone that was worth the 5th pick was Stephon Gilmore, who, spent a few good years in Buffalo, but then really, took the scene when he went over to New England and won Defensive Player of the Year at a point. Really an elite shutdown corner for a good few years there in New England, and even still today, still playing at a very high level for Carolina. So a corner that's just stuck around the league and pretty much played at an elite level wherever he's gone would have been a fantastic pickup to upgrade that secondary for the Buccaneers. He'd be a fantastic player to have for them. So definitely would have been a huge upgrade over Marcus Barron. There's a few other picks that could be the case here. Again, Bobby Wagner's still there. The Buccaneers did draft Levante David in this class, so maybe they get a replacement linebacker, but I do have them taking Stephon Gilmore and getting a much, much, much better secondary player in this case. Then number 6 overall, we have the Rams, and the Rams are picking here and the Jaguars were picking next. And for me, it really came down to 2 guys because these were both teams that really needed help when it came to pass rush. And I was like, ooh, Fletcher Cox or Chandler Jones. And I was thinking about the two, and it was really tough. And I decided, from a pure pass rush standpoint, I think I'll go Chandler Jones. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and the fact that both teams ran a 4-3 at the time, unless that's wrong. But from what I could see, both teams ran a 4-3. I do think Chandler Jones, while an elite pass rusher, does fit better in a 3-4. And so I did, at the end of the day, have Fletcher Cox going over Chandler Jones, number 6, to the Rams. Now, in real life, they would trade down and take Michael Brockers, which was not a bad pick at all. Michael Brockers would have a solid career with the Rams and is still sticking around with the Lions today. He was a piece to that Super Bowl run that they had a few years ago. But To me, I mean, it's Fletcher Cox. I mean, the dude was definitely one of the best interior defensive players in the NFL for 10 years. Well, for the 2010s, and arguably the greatest interior player for the 2010s. I mean, he's not above Aaron Donald. Let's just be honest, but was certainly up there. And so, yeah, Michael Brockers was a great pick and all. But if you're going to kind of retake that interior player, or at the very least a defensive lineman, I just think Fletcher Cox fits a bit better. And my God, could you imagine Fletcher Cox with Aaron Donald? That might be the scariest defensive tackle duo, certainly, but defensive rush pairing of all time. That would be insanely scary. So I think it makes sense for a lot of reasons here for the Rams. Fletcher would in real life go to 12 to Philadelphia, which would be a great pick for them. Number 7, we have the Jaguars, and like I said, I was thinking between the two. I ended up going with Chandler Jones in the end. In real life, they would take Justin Blackmon, which is really one of the biggest, what ifs in NFL history, because was a very talented receiver, but just could not stay out of trouble really, and obviously that just didn't lead to anything with the Jaguars. Whereas Chandler Jones has gone on to be arguably the most fearsome pass rusher, or at least edge threat of the last 10 years. I don't know what else there is to say to that. I mean, he was great with New England. He's been great for Arizona, and he's still one of the top pass rushers in the league today. So, I mean, he can certainly fit a 4-3. I think he does fit better as a 3-4, but he could certainly go in there in a 4-3. And, this would have just been another piece to that Jaguars defense. Because, again, similar to imagining Fletcher Cox with Aaron Donald, could you imagine Chandler Jones on that Saxonville defense? That might be the scariest defense ever assembled, and I don't think a quarterback would ever be able to get away from Chandler Jones, Calais Campbell, and then of course, they had Jalen Ramsey, and that was a scary defense, and so Chandler Jones would have just made that even more fearsome. Patriots got a steal at 21 in real life. Number 8, the Dolphins, originally taking Ryan Tannehill, who just never did anything with the Dolphins. He had a bit of a career resurgence when he went to the Titans, but with the Dolphins, just never did anything. So I am going to have them still taking a quarterback, though, and I have them taking Kirk Cousins, who he seems to be a hot topic of debate nowadays. In my opinion, I do think Kirk Cousins has been a top 10 quarterback this year. He is a pretty good quarterback. In fact, if you really do go look at his stats, even since his days in Washington, he was never a bad quarterback. I mean, yeah, he's had a few definitely not great years, but overall, I mean, I think this is a guy that definitely, could elevate a few teams to a contender status. Like if you put Kirk Cousins on a team like, the Broncos, or just a team that's a quarterback away, right? Maybe someone like the Dolphins or something. And don't get that wrong. We have him going to the Dolphins, but don't get that wrong. I do like Tua, but Kirk Cousins, I just think he's a guy that's been really underrated most of his career. And who knows, maybe he kind of works out there in Miami and is able to help them become a bit more competitive than they really ever were with Ryan Tannehill. And I think, you can argue whether he should be going this high, but 4th round was certainly a steal at the very least for Washington, even if he didn't play the best there. Still a great pick, though. Here, number 8 for the Dolphins. Again, maybe he leads them to something that they never had with Tannehill. Number 9, we have the Panthers, who are going to take Luke Kuechly's replacement in Bobby Wagner. Luke Kuechly went much earlier at pick 4. So at this pick, you're going to get the second best linebacker, which is still an incredible linebacker. And there's still another linebacker here to come that's great. I already mentioned earlier. But Bobby Wagner, though, if Luke Kuechly wasn't around, Bobby Wagner probably would have been the best linebacker of the 2010s. The dude is he's a tackle machine, but he's just such a fearsome defender, and he has been for almost a decade now. A decade now. I mean, it's been 10 years, and he doesn't look to be slowing down, really. I mean, Seattle's thinking of giving him the highest paid defensive player contract because he still plays at that level. And so, yeah, you're not getting Luke Kuechly. He's not quite Luke Kuechly. I mean, Bobby Wagner's likely a Hall of Famer, right? He's not quite Luke Kuechly, but he would certainly still be a great pickup. And again, we're already seeing that, Seattle got Kuechly and Russell Wilson in the same draft, and not even in the first round for either of them. So this was a great pick for them, at 47, and this would be a great pick for the Panthers here. So yeah, it's not quite Luke Kuechly. It is still fantastic. Number 10, the Bills. They would get a pretty good pick here in Stephon Gilmore. Now, he didn't stick around for too long, but he did give some solid years there. Instead, we're going to be picking another great defensive player here with Levante David, the other big name linebacker out of this class. And, similar to Wagner, he's still kicking around today and he's still one of the league's best. The dude is an elite coverage linebacker and he's also just a force in the run game. And it would have been a great pick for the Bills where, yeah, I mean, your secondary is still going to struggle a little bit, but at the very least, you're getting a solid coverage guy and more than solid, honestly. Like I said, he's one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL. So Levante David would have been a great pickup for these Bills and would be still a good contributing piece even today for them if he did stick around. So David, yeah, I mean, secondary, maybe you'd want to focus there, but he is still a great pick for this Bills team who needed some defensive help. Then at number 11, we have the Chiefs. In real life, would take Don Terry Poe, who would have a really good, first half of his career, and then he would really taper off in the second half. Now he's struggling to really find a job anywhere in the NFL. Just injuries have gotten to him and stuff, but did have a really good, solid start to his career. However, I don't think that's worth overtaking him over David DeCastro, who, similar to Mitchell Schwartz, started out maybe a little bit slow, but pretty quickly really did become one of the better offensive linemen. And he definitely kind of tapered off these last couple years, but from like 2014 to 2019, he was arguably the greatest interior offensive player in the league. He was a phenomenal guard, and just would have been such a great addition to this Chiefs team that, you had Alex Smith and you're trying to compete right now, but his offensive line was not always the greatest for him. And so maybe getting a piece like DeCastro could have really helped Alex Smith, to that next level and maybe gotten the Chiefs closer to a Super Bowl. So Don Terry Poe was great, right? He was pretty much elite for those first 5 years or so, but David DeCastro had just a dominant 6-7 years with the Steelers, and the Chiefs would have loved that. And again, maybe he doesn't taper off, a couple years ago in this scenario, but the Chiefs would have gotten a great player here. Then at number 12, we have the Seahawks, and there might arguably be some better players to pick here over Bruce Irvin. However, when you look at it, I just think, they traded down, took Bruce Irvin, and things went pretty good for them. I mean, he was a great contributor to, the Legion of Boom, and he helped them win a Super Bowl, get to 2. So at the end of the day, like, maybe there's a different player you could take here. Maybe you could take someone else, but with Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner being off the board, why not just take a guy that at the end of the day, he did help you to a pretty great run? And yeah, they probably don't make that run without Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner. Who knows how this would all play out. But at the end of the day, still had a great career. He's definitely lessened in these last few years, but did have a pretty great career with the Seahawks, though. And I don't think that there's another edge rusher that really Seattle should take. They could take someone different. I have them taking Bruce Irvin. Then at number 13, the Cardinals. They took Michael Floyd, who, I mean, this entire receiver class just ended up being a pretty horrible class. I think there's like one or two good guys out of this class, and they're not all that great. One's pretty good, but at the end of the day, I mean, the Cardinals really just needed offensive help. They weren't a team that was really ready to go compete for much. I mean, like, yeah, compete for much. I mean, they just been in the Super Bowl pretty recently, right? I mean, I think 2011 or whatever. But they were a team that very obviously needed some help going forward into the future, and they were hoping a guy like Michael Floyd could be that guy where they try to keep up that offense, and just didn't end up being that. Sure, they could take themselves a T.Y. Hilton, but instead, I have them taking Brandon Brooks, who started out with Houston, really never did anything spectacular there. Then he went to the Eagles and became one of the best guards in the NFL. The Cardinals for a little while there did definitely have one of the less good offensive lines in the NFL. So Brandon Brooks could have really helped that out. Maybe Kyler Murray has some better protection to start off his career. Or even then before that, who was the quarterback before Kyler? It was, who was it? I can't even remember actually who it was before. It's probably some super obvious answer, but either way, just getting some offensive line help would have been great for the Cardinals here, though. So, yeah. Moving on to number 14, we have the Cowboys, who in real life would trade up and take Morris Claiborne. And, I mean, Claiborne just never was really anything. Another guy that just was okay, certainly still draftable, but just not worth the 14th pick or the 6th pick. And so in this redraft, I do have the Cowboys still going in the secondary and getting themselves a safety that's been really great for the last decade in Harrison Smith. Maybe takes a bit of a free fall, but I just think, when you know what you're getting out of these guys, a safety does become a little bit less valuable, even if he is a great one like Harrison Smith. And Harrison Smith, again, similar to a lot of these guys, still kicking around today. He's getting on the older side, but Harrison Smith, just a hard hitting elite safety and has been for the Vikings. The Cowboys, who have especially struggled with, their secondary in the last few years, and I don't want to hear, Trevon Diggs is so good or anything like that. I'm talking to you, Camo. Harrison Smith, just would have been great for these Cowboys and would have been a fantastic player to have at the time and now. So Harrison Smith, number 14 of the Cowboys. Number 15, we have the Eagles, who would, like we said, take Fletcher Cox. They would trade up for him, actually. Instead, I'm going to have them taking Akeem Hicks. They still do go at the defensive line here. I had a lot of teams kind of just going the same area that they did in the draft, but I have them taking Akeem Hicks, who started out in New Orleans, similar to a lot of these other guys, just was okay with New Orleans. He had mainly a solid last year, which earned him a good contract with the Bears. And since then, he's really turned into one of the better interior guys in the NFL. He's been a little streaky overall, but still one of the better players. And so for a team like the Eagles, where you really built that team off the defense to make that Super Bowl run, and maybe Fletcher Cox maybe Akeem Hicks isn't on the same level as Fletcher Cox, but he would still ultimately help you to try to make that Super Bowl run, though. And I think he would do a good job of it. And obviously, again, still kicking around today, so would still be a good contributor wherever, but hopefully with the Eagles in this situation. It's kind of weird, actually. I couldn't find his college at first. I didn't know he went to Canada, went to university in Canada. That's why it was tough finding his college for some reason. Just a little fun fact, though. But Akeem Hicks to the Eagles at 15. Then ending off the first half here, we have the Jets, who would take Quentin Coples, and this is really like the first, besides like Michael Floyd and stuff, really the first big bust of this draft. And I mean, that's kind of what the Jets do. But Quentin Coples, he was a fine player, but it's just compared to a lot of these other guys that were taken here in this first round, definitely a miss on the Jets' part. And so instead, they're going to be taking Whitney Merciless, who would go on to have a pretty solid career with the Texans for the past decade. He's been a quiet name recently, and so that's why I think people probably gonna underrate him a little bit, just because he's not done much recently, and that's mainly because he's not a 4-3 defender. I mean, he's a 3-4 guy, and the Texans are running 4-3 right now. But the Jets at the time did run 3-4, and so he would have fit, and he would have been a pretty good player for them for the last decade. So yeah, he's not a player that's going to take you to the Super Bowl, but when you're a team like the Jets that, like, we know they weren't going to end up competing in the end, even though it did look like they might at the time, Whitney Merciless would have still been a great player for you for the next decade. And moving on to the Bengals. Originally, they would take corner Drake Kirkpatrick, which would be an okay pick. I mean, he's still floating around in the league, but he's just not a starter level guy. Like, he can start, but he's really a depth corner. And it's just, compared to a guy like Casey Hayward, for example, it's just not the greatest pick. Casey Hayward, drafted by the Packers, really started to stand out with the Chargers, where he had some pretty good years. But now with the Raiders, he's currently, having probably the best season of his career. And it's just a guy where he's gotten better with time. And, the Bengals with a guy like Casey Hayward right now would be, an already better team than they are. So it's just kind of one of those things where, like, yeah, Kirkpatrick is still definitely draftable. He's probably a second or third rounder in a redraft. But Casey Hayward, just better than that, has had a better career and still looks to have a better future. So it just would have been a better pick here. And again, Casey Hayward on the Bengals today would help that defense out even more and be even more scary. So Casey Hayward to the Bengals here at 17. Then at number 18, we have the Chargers. In similar case to the Seahawks. I mean, yeah, the Chargers haven't won a Super Bowl or anything, but just don't break it if it doesn't need to be fixed. I know that's not how the saying goes, but that's basically what I'm saying here is, it's why break it if it's not broken. Melvin Ingram has been a solid pick for them, and he's been, probably one of their best players, if not their best player of the last decade. So yeah, I mean, it's just, he's with the Chiefs now, obviously, went to the Steelers and is now with the Chiefs. and he's still a solid player today, but really did give this Chargers team, his best years, and just was a great pass rusher overall for them. And so it's just, why not go with him again? I don't see harm in it. I didn't see much better of a pick here, so I have the Chargers still taking Melvin Ingram. Number 19, we have the Bears taking the first receiver off the board. Originally, they would go Shea McClellan. I've never heard of this guy. Um, Instead, we're going to go with a wide receiver here for, at the time, the Bears, obviously, just again, a team that wasn't really competing for much at the time. However, Shea McClellan just simply did not help the team out at all. At the time, you have, who was their quarterback? It was it Jay Cutler? I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was still Jay Cutler. And, they'd also just drafted Alshon Jeffrey as well. And I remember they still had Brandon Marshall as well. And so, they had a team that was trying to build up something. I'm pretty sure they also had Julius Peppers and still had Urlacher and Briggs. So, I mean, and even Charles Tillman, I'm looking at their roster now. I just realized Charles Tillman's there. Yeah, so for the Bears, like, they had a pretty good defense going from. They were old, sure, but they had a pretty good defense, and their offense was also pretty solid as well. So this is a team that maybe with a guy like T.Y. Hilton, of course, Jay Cutler wasn't the best quarterback or anything, but maybe with T.Y. Hilton, that offense really goes over the top, and they truly do go to compete for something. I mean, they made a few playoff runs, but could a prime T.Y. Hilton have been the difference for them? Who knows? So he could have been a great pickup here for these Bears, and definitely a better pickup over McClellan. In real life, taking the third round. And really, if you look at this draft, besides Alshon Jeffrey, really the only other worthwhile pick here. And like I said, Alshon Jeffrey taken by the Bears originally. So either way, they would need a receiver. I think T.Y. Hilton's over Alshon Jeffrey personally. Not the best nowadays, but he did have a pretty good prime with the Colts. So I think it's a worthwhile pick for the Bears. Then at number 20, the Titans are going to take Demario Davis. Now, this is a weird pick, right? Because originally they would take another one of these big bust receivers in Kendall Wright. Just never did anything for them. If you look at Demario Davis, originally taken by the Jets and just never really shined with the Jets. And then he went to the Saints, and now he's one of the best linebackers in football. He's legitimately in the conversation as a top 3 linebacker. He's really that good and does a lot of great things for that Saints defense. So truly one of the more elite players currently. And if you look at a team like the Titans, where I think at the time they had, I think it was like Wesley Woodyard. They also might have had, what's his name? I'm trying to think of it. I can't remember, but they had a solid linebacking core at the time, but it wasn't gonna like last around or anything. They definitely didn't have any like game changers at the position. Demario Davis, maybe he takes a couple years, but could you imagine Demario Davis on that defense now? I mean, that with Jayon Brown and Rashawn Evans and the rest of that defense, you've got yourself a really, really scary defense there to go along with that offense. So and even before then, he's been great for probably the last 4 or 5 years for the Saints. So just would have been a great pickup for the Titans. And again, just even if he's not the best pick in the world, like sure, he's still not probably going to be anything for those first 2 or 3 years. It's still better than Kendall Wright, that's for sure. Number 21, we have the Bengals again. And in real life would take Kevin Zeitler, who, obviously more known for his career with the Giants, did have a pretty solid outing over there, but not much for the Bengals. Instead, we're going to be going with interior again, and this time going with Ben Jones, who was also drafted by Houston, which really makes me wonder, they could have had 2 great interior players and they didn't keep either. But either way, though, I mean, Ben Jones, one of the best centers of the last decade, and still currently one of the best centers in the league. For a team like the Bengals, which has struggled with finding an offensive line the past decade, and it still has one of the worst offensive lines. Having a guy like Ben Jones in there, just as a certified center, at the very least, you have a great center there. Even if the rest of the line, who knows, maybe doesn't turn out so great. Ben Jones is still great, though, and would have been a good pick for the Bengals, and they get 2 great players in this redraft. Then at number 22, we have Ryan Tannehill finally coming off the board to the Browns, who in real life would take 28-year-old Brandon Weeden. Brandon Weeden is actually the oldest NFL player to ever be drafted at the age of 28. And so he didn't work out, to tell you the least. Maybe some of you have never even heard of him, but that he didn't work out. I can tell you that much. And Ryan Tannehill, maybe it's a similar situation. I mean, he just would not have had anything to work with at the time. The Browns are still going to be looking for their franchise quarterback, and is it Ryan Tannehill in this case scenario? Probably not, but you do got to take a bet on someone. I could see RG3 here. It's just if you really want to base it off here, the fact that RG3 just didn't have much of a career because he didn't have protection and he didn't, have weapons really to go to is kind of why he failed. And so with a team like the Browns, would he fare any better? He'd probably fare a little bit worse. So that's why with Ryan Tannehill, I think he's at the very least got a bit more, just starter level play to him for a worse team. We still saw him start for years there in Miami. And if the Browns ever get their crap together quicker in the scenario, Ryan Tannehill can lead them to something nice, because we're seeing right now, if you put talent around him, Ryan Tannehill is, a mid-tier quarterback. I think, this year it's kind of showing that he's not this great quarterback like everybody thought he was, because when teams know he's going to pass, he has a tough time actually passing. Regardless, still would have been a much better pick than Brandon Weeden, and so I do have the Browns taking Ryan Tannehill. Number 23, we have the Lions, who in real life would take Riley Reef. Stayed there a few years, moved to the division rival Vikings. Just a tackle that, similar to a few other guys, just never was anything special. And instead, they're going to take Dennis Kelly, who started off his career with the Eagles. And it's kind of wild because, what if the Eagles get a, Brandon Brooks and, who am I thinking of? Brandon Brooks and... Yeah, just Brandon Brooks. I was thinking of Ben Jones for some reason. But imagine they get Brandon Brooks and then have Dennis Kelly, at left tackle. Well, Jason Peters was there, though. So, or was he? No. What am I talking about? Was he? Yes. I'm having a complete brain fart right now. Either way, though, Dennis Kelly would have helped out the Lions. Bears are irrelevant to this right now. They would have helped out the Lions a bit more than Riley Reef was. Another team that, at the time, looked like they might have something of a future going on, but obviously they wouldn't. But Dennis Kelly would have been a great tackle to have there. He's still in the league today and is still one of the better tackles in the NFL. He's not quite elite or anything, but we're also getting to that range where it's not quite like elite or consistent players anymore. And if you're going to take a tackle again, I think Dennis Kelly is an upgrade over Riley Reef at the least, though. Number 24, we have the Steelers, who are taking a guy that's probably falling a bit. I know I just said this is mostly inconsistent or not the best players. That's not the case with Dont'a Hightower. He just kind of takes a fall because the teams that, wanted a linebacker got a linebacker, and this was just a very good full linebacker class where he does fall a little bit and instead, gets picked around the same area, except one pick higher to the Steelers, who at the time they were still building up a defense. Even though it was still one of the better defenses, they were still looking to upgrade it in some areas. Obviously still a great team. They had some great veterans and stuff, but getting a guy like Dont'a Hightower could have helped them keep up kind of that Super Bowl run. Maybe would have helped them get another Super Bowl run or two, just to have an elite playmaker on that defense and a great run stopper. It does hurt to lose David DeCastro, as he, was a great interior player, just a great offensive lineman for the Steelers. But Dont'a Hightower would have still been great for a team that didn't have an elite player at coverage linebackers. So Dont'a Hightower, again, would have been a good pick for the Steelers. Then at number 25, the Broncos in real life would trade down to the 36th pick and take Derek Wolfe. A similar case to Bruce Irvin and Melvin Ingram. If it's not broke, don't try to fix it. Derek Wolfe would be a big piece to their 2016 Super Bowl run. He was, not the best player in the world. He wasn't Von Miller, but he was still a solid contributor and, was a Broncos fan favorite for a while that he was there in Denver. So, to be honest, I just don't think that there's many other players. The only other player I could really see here being the pick is probably Dontari Poe, just because this Broncos team was still building up their defense at the time. Von Miller was only going into his second year, and a lot of their other guys. Chris Harris Jr. was still a really young player. So the defense in general was just still trying to get built up. So like I said, defensive line was a big need. Dontari Poe could be the pick here, and he could. But Derek Wolfe, again, was a big piece to the Broncos defense. I don't think Dontari Poe would be the difference between winning and losing the Super Bowl in 2014. So Derek Wolfe, Broncos fan favorite, I just have him going back to Denver again, but just earlier. Then at the 26th pick, we have the Texans, who would have a pretty good draft, although their players didn't really stick around. And at this pick, they would take Whitney Merciless, who, like we said, would be a great player. He went 10 picks earlier. And so because of that, they're going to go with Alshon Jeffrey. The Texans were trying to build something up. It would take a few more years, but eventually they would have themselves a really good team with Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins, JJ Watt, a lot of great players there. And Alshon Jeffrey, really had more of his prime from like that 2014 to 2017 area. And so he would have kind of been in, the end of his prime when Deshaun Watson came around, which would have given him another weapon. And who knows, maybe, his prime goes a little bit longer and he still plays really well in 2018, 2019. And maybe the Texans make it a little bit further, maybe all the way with another weapon in their arsenal. So, yeah, it's not the flashiest pick. He didn't have the best career. Was taken in the second round, but he would still have been a solid contributor. And it's not that the Texans made they made a great pick. It's just that he's already off the board. So I do have them taking Alshon Jeffrey to help out. At the time, their quarterback was, I want to say Matt Schaub, but it's probably wrong. But either way, though, Jeffrey would have been a pretty good receiver for them to have. 27, the Patriots, instead of trading up 2 picks to take Hightower, because him and Chandler Jones is far off the board, but Highsmith just going a little bit ago, or Hightower going just a little bit ago, they're going to take Dontari Poe. And for a team that is about to go make a few more Super Bowl runs and such, I mean, they're already a really good team, and obviously one of those Super Bowl runs especially was built off the backs of guys like Hightower and Chandler Jones. So when they're off the board, I feel like you still got to go in a similar situation. And I think at that point, the best player on the board is Dontari Poe. Like I said, they were about to go make a few more Super Bowl runs. Well, I mean, every year was a Super Bowl run for them, but a few more Super Bowl titles in real life. And in this situation, I think they still go defense and instead take the best guy on the board, which is Dontari Poe. And he had that elite, part of his career kind of in those first 5 years. Again, these last 5 years not been the best for him, but those first 5 years truly was one of the best interior players. And so I think when it comes to just the Patriots making those runs, I think he's worth the pick because he's going to help you get those Super Bowls. Maybe you win even one more than you did. And, with Dontari Poe, I mean, yeah, maybe he tapers off at the half after the half, but you got the Super Bowls with him, and he could have been a worthwhile replacement for Hightower and Chandler at the time. So I think he would have been a good pick for the Patriots. Then at number 28, we have the Packers. They would take Nick Perry, who just was a bust of a pick. It just, again, compared to a lot of the talent taken here, just did not have a good career compared to the rest of them. They would also take Casey Hayward, as we know, but he just really didn't stick around for much. And so overall, this was not the best draft for the Packers. In fact, that's kind of part of the reason why Rodgers and the Packers haven't had much success after that Super Bowl from what it would have been a couple years ago at this point, that they just weren't drafting well, especially on the defense. They were taking shots at guys like Hayward and Perry, but they weren't working out. So in this universe, we're going to instead give them Tremaine Johnson, who would go on to have a pretty good career with the Rams and the Jets. Mainly more the Jets, but still played pretty well for, at the time, the St. Louis Rams. And I just think it's a solid pick. It's a player that, would have gone in there and helped make an impact for a team that was looking for defensive help. And, secondary wasn't the biggest of their needs, but they still, they took a corner. So why not take another corner and Tremaine Johnson, who would have definitely been a bit more of a help than either Perry or Hayward. So I think this would have been a solid pick for the Packers. And it was definitely a steal in the third round, even if he didn't do a ton for St. Louis. Number 29, maybe a bit of a controversial pick, Courtney Upshaw. Personally, I've never heard of this guy. I'm sure maybe Ravens fans have heard of him, but just never heard of him. And so obviously he just did not make a huge impact in Baltimore. I'm sure he had but he did have a couple okay years. But with Justin Tucker, on the other hand, I know you can debate whether a kicker or a punter should be taken in the first round. At the end of the day, in a draft class where, you're starting to get to that part of the draft where talent is definitely dropping off, why not just take Justin Tucker, which you would sign later as an undrafted free agent? And I think at this point, Justin Tucker is probably the best kicker of all time. He's been a great player for the Ravens the last decade. why not just ensure that he stays on the team at this point? Because there's not really anyone you're going to get with like fantastic value or like anything of big need. You're going to go win a Super Bowl sometime that year, actually. That year they'd won a Super Bowl, I'm pretty sure, anyways, or it'd be this next year. So for the Ravens, like, you don't really need like a Courtney Upshaw to go win that Super Bowl. Just get yourself Justin Tucker, make sure he's there. And I think it makes sense for the Ravens. So yeah, it's a kicker, but hey, it's Justin Tucker. Then at number 30, the 49ers would take another one of these big bust receivers in AJ Jenkins. I mean, you can kind of see through the quality of the photo that this guy just did not turn into anything. In fact, I actually think that's a practice squad photo. Instead, they are going to take a receiver again, but this time with Marvin Jones Jr. Would go to the Bengals and then had a pretty solid run with the Lions. And this is a guy that, he's just I think he's been a bit underappreciated in his career. He's a really solid guy. He's always put up solid numbers and year in, year out just goes in and does his thing. Now, he's not been good with the Jaguars this year because, it's the Jaguars, but still, again, been one of the more underappreciated receivers in the NFL this last decade. And definitely, if he's your number two, number three, definitely one of the better number twos or number threes. So yeah, for a team that just they were looking for offensive help for Colin Kaepernick and stuff, coming off of I think Colin Kaepernick had been the starter for like 2 years or something. You're just looking to help him get some weapons for him to actually throw instead of just run the ball all the time. Marvin Jones would have been an actual help to that instead of AJ Jenkins. Definitely was a steal, probably the steal of the draft in terms of actually drafting players, because Justin Tucker was the steal of the draft, let's be honest. But in terms of actually drafting players, Marvin Jones the steal of the draft, and so I've been picking Jones number 30. Then at 31, the Patriots would in real life trade up with this pick to get Chandler Jones. Obviously, that's a much, much better pick. I mean, he went off all the way back at number 7. Instead, they're going to be taking Kevin Zeitler, again, for a team that's about to go make some Super Bowl runs. It's just, sure, that was partially off the backs of Hightower and Chandler, but with them off the board, they took Dontari Poe, got a great defensive player. Their offensive line was still really good, but they did have an older guard, and Zeitler could have been a solid starter for them just in place when that guy got retired. That's just kind of when that guy did retire. That's just kind of the place that the Patriots were in at the time. So why not just kind of make sure you're good for the future, because you already know that you're good for the present for the most part, at least with the situation you're hoping with taking Dontari. So yeah, Patriots, it's Dontari Poe and Kevin Zeitler is definitely less flashy picks than Chandler and Dante, but it's what you can do at this point when you draft that well that late. And then the last pick of the draft, and yeah, I mean, I just had this conversation about Tucker, but listen, like Johnny Hekker, he's the best punter in the league, and it's really not even close right now. If you look at the stats, just as far as like, average punt yards, net punt yards, just how efficient he is, Johnny Hekker, if you're going off of stats, is the greatest punter of all time. For a team like the Giants that, again, you're really competitive right now. You're just coming off of a couple Super Bowl runs. Like, you're a team that you're in a good spot right now. About to go try to win a Super Bowl again. I think they won this. Yeah, they won the Super Bowl just the year before. You're going to be trying to go do it again. And for a team at the time that you think, we got a lot solved, right? We got a lot of good players, and you're picking number 32, and there's just not a lot of quality players left. Instead of taking David Wilson, who would overall be a pretty big bust, why not get yourself the greatest punter of all time? Because I mean, is he better than Ray Guy? That's debatable, but he'd probably go down as the greatest punter. Why not get yourself the greatest punter of all time, Johnny Hekker? Because believe it or not, punters do make a difference. I mean, you can certainly win games off of punters, and I mean that. Field position's a big part to football. Johnny Hekker, who knows? Maybe could have done something a bit more for these Giants. He's been fantastic for the Rams, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like you don't really ever trade for kickers or punters, but I mean, if you ever did trade for Johnny Hekker or Justin Tucker, it'd actually probably be worth a lot. So I think kickers and punters are worth a bit more than people think, especially when you're at the end of talent in a draft class. Really, you just won the Super Bowl. You think you can go make another run. Why not take the best punter in Johnny Hekker and just get a great player? But that is going to be my 2012 redraft. Certainly going to be some picks in here people don't agree with. I'm aware people are probably not going to like Dontari Poe going so low. Probably going to disagree with Hekker and Tucker getting drafted in the first. stuff like that. If I did miss any players, let me know down below. If I made any dumb picks, let me know down below. These are my picks. You have your opinions, I have mine. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Yes, I'm aware of how fast I talk. I'll try to slow it down. But that is going to be the video. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see all you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.